You are listening to the Happiest Lives podcast with Jill Lillard, episode 141.
Welcome to the Happiest Lives podcast, where you'll learn to think better, feel better, and become the woman God says you already are. Here's your host, Jill Lillard.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Happiest Lives podcast. We're in a series on emotional attunement. This is the second episode in this series. So if you missed the first, you can go back and listen to it, but it's perfectly fine to just hop in right here. We're talking about why couples so often miss each other. And this just isn't for couples. This can be other relationships you have, your relationships with your kids, your friends, your parents. It's not because we don't care. It's because we're out of sync. So in the last episode, we talked about what attunement actually is and why so many couples feel disconnected, even when they love each other, even when they're trying. We talked about how disconnection isn't usually about a lack of effort or a lack of desire. It's about being misaligned, emotionally out of step. Today, I want to get more specific. When connection starts to feel uncertain, when something feels off between us, most of us don't just sit with that discomfort. We move. We either push for closeness or we pull away from it. And that's what today's episode is about. So push and pull are not personality traits. They're not character flaws. They're not signs that something is wrong with you or your relationship. They are ways people try to manage discomfort when connection feels uncertain. So something feels off. There's distance, tension, awkwardness, a sense that we're not quite on the same page. And instead of staying present with that uncertainty, we try to do something about it. So I want to slow down this word uncertainty for a little bit because it can sound very abstract. I'm not talking about a big question like, are we getting divorced? Is this relationship over? I'm talking about the kind of uncertainty that shows up in real life. Sometimes it's small moments and sometimes it's bigger ones. Sometimes it's subtle. You're not sure why something felt off. You feel a little distance and can't quite name it. And other times it's bigger. It's when something hurt you and you did not feel understood, or you tried to talk about it and it went nowhere. Or you're wanting a certain level of connection and the other person keeps missing it, not responding, not engaging. They're not wanting the same thing. Sometimes it's that sense of, I miss you, even though you're in the same house, or you're here, but you're not really here. Are we okay? Why does this feel unresolved? Why do I feel disconnected from you? Why am I wanting more than you seem to want? It's that feeling of not really knowing where you stand. Nothing is clearly falling apart, but something doesn't feel settled. You'll notice it at the end of the day when you're trying to reconnect, or when you reach out and it doesn't land, or when a bit of connection goes unanswered, or when something that mattered to you never really got addressed. And that's usually the moment people stop sitting with the discomfort and they start pushing or pulling away. So push is one of the ways people try to manage connection when something feels off. For some people, the instinct when there's distance or uncertainty is to move toward. They reach, they initiate, they want closeness. Turning toward is actually a healthy relational move, and it's something I often encourage. But when that movement is driven by fear of distance, fear of things not being okay, fear of losing connection, it can start to change. Sometimes the push is about wanting to reconnect or resolve something, wanting to talk it through, wanting to feel close again, wanting the tension to ease. And sometimes the push shifts into something else. It becomes about needing the other person to behave in a way so you can feel okay again. That's when we start making demands instead of invitations. We force conversations. We insist things get handled on our timetable. We push for certain responses, certain words, certain actions. We may not say it this way, but underneath it's often, if you would just do this, I would feel more secure. I would feel more loved. I would feel okay. Now, from the inside, this still usually doesn't feel controlling. It feels like, I just want us to be okay. I need this to settle. I don't want this distance between us. What's happening is an attempt to reduce uncertainty by creating closeness or by creating predictability. And that makes sense. The movement itself isn't the problem. Turning toward can be loving and connecting. The shift happens when fear starts driving the reach, when the goal becomes making the discomfort stop instead of trying to be present with one another. At that point, what feels like care or desire to the person moving toward can land as pressure on the other side. It can feel like expectation, like there's a rule book or a manual they're supposed to follow in order for you to be okay. And pressure, even well-intended pressure, it does not feel like safety. So pulling away or pull is the other way people try to manage connection when something feels off. For some people, the instinct when there's tension or uncertainty is to move away. They step back, they quiet down, they create space. Pulling back can actually be a healthy response when someone needs time to think, regulate, or make sense of what they're feeling. But when that movement is driven by discomfort or fear of conflict, fear of overwhelm, fear of getting it wrong, it can start to change. Sometimes pulling back looks like needing a break or wanting to pause a conversation so it doesn't escalate. Sometimes it's choosing silence because you don't have the words yet. Sometimes it's staying busy, distracted, or focused on other things so you don't have to engage. And sometimes the pull deepens. It turns into avoidance. Conversations don't happen. Topics get minimized. Feelings go unspoken. Distance becomes the way things stay manageable. So from the inside, pull usually doesn't feel rejecting. It feels like, I don't want to make this worse. I don't know what to say. I need time to think. This feels like too much. What's happening is an attempt to reduce uncertainty by lowering intensity. And that makes sense. The movement itself isn't the problem. Creating space can be wise and necessary. It becomes a problem when fear starts driving the retreat, when pulling back becomes the primary way to feel safe, when you don't come back to the conversation. So at that point, what feels like self-protection to the person pulling back can land as disinterest or rejection on the other side. It can feel like emotional absence, like there's no way in. Any disconnection, even unintentional disconnection, doesn't feel like safety either. And this is where push and pull start to interact with each other because these two moves don't just exist on their own, they respond to each other. So when one person pushes, the other often feels it as pressure. And pressure tends to trigger pulling back. When one person pulls away, the other often experiences that as distance or rejection. And that distance tends to trigger more pushing. So what starts as two people trying to feel safe ends up creating the opposite. One person moves toward to calm the uncertainty, and the other person moves away to calm the intensity. And each person's move makes the other person feel less safe. This is the loop. Push feels invasive, so it triggers pull. Pull feels rejecting, so it triggers push. Neither person is trying to hurt the other. Neither person is trying to create distance. Each person is responding to discomfort in the only way that feels available in the moment. What's hard about this loop is that it escalates quietly. The person pushing often feels more and more anxious. They may reach more, explain more, ask more, insist more. From their side, it feels like effort, like caring, like they're trying. The person pulling often feels more and more overwhelmed. They may go quiet, shut down faster, avoid harder. From their side, it feels like self-protection, like trying not to make things worse. And the more each person leans into their move, the more stuck the relationship feels. This is why couples so often say things like, no matter what I do, it just gets worse. Or we keep having the same argument. Or I don't know how we got here. They're not stuck because they don't care. They're stuck because they're caught in a pattern. And until you see the loop, it's really hard to step out of it. And if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, I see this pattern, but I'm not always sure which way I move, I made a simple printable on this exact topic. I shared it last month, but it's still available. It walks you through these push and pull tendencies in a really straightforward way. And it also introduces you to a third option, something other than reaching harder or shutting down when connection feels uncertain. You can find that at myhappyvault.com/uncertain. It's there if you want something practical to sit with alongside this conversation. This is also where a lot of well-intentioned tools start to get misused. One of those is the concept of love languages. So if you're not familiar with love languages, it tells us that there are 5 different ways that we express and receive love. And if you understand what your language is and you understand what your partner's language is, you can strive to meet each other's needs and you will feel more loved and loving. For many couples, learning about love languages was genuinely helpful. It gave language to something they couldn't quite explain before. It helped people see that love doesn't land the same for everyone. For a lot of relationships, that was a relief. The problem isn't the concept of love languages. The problem is what happens when fear enters the picture. When connection feels uncertain, love languages often stop being about understanding and start becoming about managing. Instead of curiosity, they turn into expectation. Instead of invitation, they turn into instruction. It sounds like, you know my love language, or I've told you what I need, or if you would just do this, I would feel loved. At that point, the focus quietly shifts. Connection becomes about getting the right behavior instead of feeling connected in the moment. And here's the part that surprises people. Even when the other person does the thing, says the words, makes the effort, checks the box, it often doesn't actually feel good because what you were wanting wasn't just the action, you were wanting the feeling underneath it. You wanted to feel chosen, seen, desired, important. And when an action happens under pressure, it doesn't create that feeling, even if it technically matches your love language. The behavior might be there, but the safety isn't. So instead of easing the push-pull cycle, love languages can sometimes reinforce it. One person pushes harder to get the right behavior, and the other person feels more pressure and pulls back. And both people walk away feeling unseen. This doesn't mean love languages are useless. It just means they can't do the job we ask them to do when fear is driving their relationship. Now, connection isn't created by following a manual. It's created when 2 people feel safe enough to be present with each other, not performing, not complying, not defending, just present. So let me make this more concrete. And before I walk through these examples, I want to say something that I think is really important. In all of these situations, the initial move toward connection is not wrong. These are bids to connect. They're the kind of bids we actually want in relationships. You want to be turning toward your partner. Before we keep going, I wanted to offer you something simple. In almost any relationship, there's a moment where you feel the shift. You feel yourself start to push or go quiet or explain or hold back. That's usually the fork in the road. I put together a short tool called the 2-minute attunement check-in. It's just a small checklist you can use when you feel tension or emotional intensity. It helps you notice your urge under stress and ask one honest question before you react. Nothing complicated, just insight and a little direction. If you'd like it, you can grab it at myhappyvault.com. All right, let's get back to it. The problem is not the bid itself, it's what is fueling the bid. So what we're thinking and feeling when we take the action may affect the way the action is being delivered, and what the other person is thinking and feeling when they receive the action is going to impact how they receive it, how they interpret it. So in some marriages, this shows up around sex. One partner is feeling disconnected. They miss their spouse. They miss feeling close. So they reach for physical connection in a way to restore that closeness. That reach in and of itself, that's not a problem. It's a bid for connection. It's a way that God has given us to connect as husband and wife. But the experience on the other side, it might be very different. The other person might feel tired or overwhelmed or emotionally somewhere else. They may not be feeling connected in their body or their heart at that moment. So instead of the bid landing as closeness, it lands as pressure. Not because there is anything wrong with sex, not because the desire is wrong, but because the internal experience doesn't match. The partner who reached out may start to feel rejected. The partner who feels pressured may start to pull back. And without either person intending it, push and pull begin to take shape. For other couples, the tension shows up around conversation. So one person wants to talk. They want to process. They want to feel emotionally close and they want to feel understood. So they reach out for a conversation as a way to connect. Again, this is not wrong. It's a bid for connection. But the other partner may not have the words yet. They may feel flooded, unsure how to respond, or afraid of saying the wrong thing. So instead of engaging, they get quiet, they delay, they pull back. From their side, it may feel like self-protection or needing time. From the other side, it can feel like disinterest or rejection. So the person who wanted connection may start to push harder for engagement, and the person who feels overwhelmed may retreat further. The same pattern, not because either person is wrong, but because their internal experiences don't line up in that moment. This dynamic isn't limited to marriage. It shows up in friendship too. One friend names that something hurt her. She wants her experience to be understood. She wants to feel seen. That, too, is a bid for connection. The other friend may hear it as criticism. She may feel defensive or misunderstood herself. So instead of listening, she explains or minimizes. The first friend feels unheard, unvalidated, and eventually she stops bringing things up. She pulls back. The friendship cools. And again, no one is out to disconnect, but the pattern did its work. Across all of these examples, the issue isn't that someone reached, and it's not automatically that someone pulled away. It's that two people are having very different internal experiences in the same moment. One person is reaching for connection, and the other person is managing overwhelm, uncertainty, or intensity. And when these experiences don't get understood, push and pull begin to form. So if you find yourself thinking, I keep making bids to connect and they're not being reciprocated, this is where understanding really matters. Not to fix it yet, not to force a response, but to slow down and get curious. What energy is fueling my reach right now? And what might the other person be thinking or feeling on their side? Because a lot of the time, their response isn't actually about you. It's about what's going on inside of them, what they're carrying, what they're afraid of, what they don't have access to in that moment. But here's the hard part. Even when their reaction isn't about you, it still lands on you. When a bid for connection isn't met, it's almost impossible not to take that personally. Of course, it stirs feelings, disappointment, hurt, frustration, and even self-doubt. That emotional response makes sense. So their action, not responding to your bid to connect, that becomes a circumstance for you, and you have a thought about it, which makes you feel something. And when those feelings of disappointment and hurt are activated, that's often when push and pull starts to intensify. So understanding that both things can be true at the same time, that their response may be about their internal world and that your feelings about it are still valid, it's an important part of staying oriented toward connection instead of turning against yourself or each other. This is also why push and pull gets mislabeled so often. So when couples are stuck in this cycle, they don't usually say, we're caught in a push and pull dynamic. They use other words. They say things like, we have communication problems. We just want different things. Our needs don't line up. I'm too much. They're emotionally unavailable. And sometimes those labels sound right, at least on the surface, but they miss what's actually happening. Because most of the time, the issue isn't a lack of effort, it isn't a lack of care, and it isn't even a lack of skill. It's a lack of attunement. Attunement is the ability to notice what's happening inside yourself and inside the other person, and to stay oriented toward connection in the middle of that. So I'm going to say that again. Attunement is the ability to notice what's happening inside of you and inside of the other person, and to stay oriented toward connection in the middle of that. When attunement is missing, we misread each other. We interpret pulling back as rejection instead of overwhelm. We interpret reaching as pressure instead of longing. We focus on behavior instead of experience. And when we lose attunement, we start trying to fix the wrong thing. We try to improve the communication when the real issue is safety. We try to negotiate needs when the real issue is fear. We try to change behavior when the real issue is disconnection. That's why so many couples feel like they're working hard and not getting anywhere. They're addressing the surface issues, the conversation, the frequency, the behavior, without seeing the relational pattern underneath it. Understanding push and pull doesn't magically fix things, but it does bring attunement back into view. It helps you slow down, stop personalizing everything, and get curious about what's actually happening between you. And that shift from fixing to attuning is what opens the door to real change. So here's the takeaway for today. I don't want you to try to fix push and pull yet. I don't want you to try to stop it. And I don't want you to turn this into another thing you're doing wrong. I want you to notice it. This week, pay attention to what happens right before things start to feel tense or off. I want you to notice when you start reaching a little harder, when you feel the urge to explain, resolve, or seek validation, when you feel yourself going quiet, distracted, or pulling back, when you feel that familiar tightening inside, the sense that something isn't settled, just notice the move that you're making. Notice whether you tend to turn toward or move away when connection feels uncertain. And if you can, add one more layer of awareness. Ask yourself, what am I hoping will happen right now? What am I trying to make stop? I don't want you to judge it. I don't want you to correct it. I just want you to get a little curious and try to understand it. And at the same time, I want you to keep this in mind. The other person is likely responding to their own internal experience. They are having thoughts, they are having feelings, they are responding to what feels like their capacity in that moment, which may have very little to do with you. That doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. It does. When a bid for connection isn't met, it's painful. Of course, it's going to stir up feelings. Of course, it's hard not to take it personally. The goal right now isn't to make those feelings go away. The goal is to stay oriented toward understanding instead of immediately moving into fixing, forcing, or retreating. That pause, that moment of awareness, is where attunement starts to come back online. So that's enough for this week. Before we wrap up, I want to mention a couple of resources I've created to support you as you sit with this. So if today's conversation helped you see push and pull more clearly, but you're not sure exactly what the alternative is to either of those, then I put together a simple printable on this exact topic. You can find it at myhappyvault.com/uncertain. Once again, that's myhappyvault.com/uncertain. It walks you through these push and pull tendencies in a really straightforward way. And it also introduces that third option, something other than reaching harder or shutting down when connection feels uncertain. And then I've also created an attunement checklist that you can use in real time when things feel tense or off. It's going to help you slow the moment down, notice what's happening internally, and stay oriented toward connection instead of self-protection. You can get that at myhappyvault.com/attunement. myhappyvault.com/attunement. Both of these are free and you can use them at your own pace, no pressure to do anything perfectly. And next week, we're going underneath the behavior. We've spent this episode naming what push and pull look like on the surface. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about why we tend to move the way we do in the first place, what shapes these patterns and what they're protecting. This conversation will help you understand yourself and the people you love with more clarity and compassion. For now, just stay with the awareness. Notice the move, notice what it stirs, and stay curious. I'll see you next week. If you want to take this work and apply it, go to myhappyvault.com. That's where I share free resources and ways to stay connected. I'll talk to you next time.